Orisa's lost control of the meta, but there are still a lot of must picks across the other roles, and some pretty obvious favorites for the tanks. But luckily there are a lot of really strong heroes that don't fit into the most overpowered comps. Heroes that get a lot better if you're good enough with them. And while they're off meta and might not fit with your team's composition, there's a lot you can play for to change the outcome of the game. Let's get into the best off meta heroes in Season 10. If you're looking to improve on the top heroes or even just your favorite ones, use the link in the description to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can help you get better, faster. And first up is Bastion. He's one of the most niche heroes in the game, but his playstyle isn't that bad. A lot of weak heroes are that way because they don't have enough impact in the game, but Bastion definitely has a lot of impact every time he uses his turret form. It's just that he's not very strong outside of that form. It's easy to get your transformation baited and then waited out. But although Bastion relies a lot on his team, you'll always have your trusty grenade to make up for it. Ever since it got upgraded in Season 6, the same season where Bastion actually was meta for a while, it's been really reliable at creating openings for picks. The cooldown is also 8 seconds, not short enough to be busted, but also not too long that you won't have multiple opportunities to get a stick throughout the fight. And although Bastion's recon form is one of the weakest neutrals out of all the DPS, it's very accurate. And with the knockup from the tactical grenade, you can get some pretty cheesy picks to make up for the inconsistency in your kit. There's still a lot of pressure to time your transformation correctly, but 6 seconds is a good duration that the enemy team has to wait out. And if you recognize that the enemy team has committed to the fight without forcing you to form, that's a mistake you can always capitalize on. Next is one of the better tanks, but not because she has the most impactful abilities that are completely uncounterable. She's actually pretty counterable. But it's Junker Queen who has one of the best neutrals, which makes her super strong despite only being useful in 1 or 2 comps. Commanding Shout has a long cooldown and requires a lot of teamwork to get value out of. Also, Genji is really the only hero that gets good use out of the speed and HP bonus, so playing Queen is definitely less about using her Shout, even though it's her signature ability. But while it's hard to use her Shout effectively, her Scattergun and Knife give her really great fight tempo. She's got the range, burst, and even the perfect fire rate for dealing maximum damage without needing to overpeak. Without her decent mid-range, it would be a lot easier to punish her, since usually shotgun type abilities are short range, but you can easily play around the objective, constantly looking for knife pools to set up picks. The damage she does on each of her abilities is pretty high, and the recent Carnage buff makes holding corners even stronger. When you're not against a team that can blow you up with slows and stuns, Queen is impossible to push through. And now that Carnage deals a total of 145 damage, getting axe cooldown resets is even stronger. Queen has some really high peaks, but although she needs some specific conditions to get there, she's got really good damage uptime until you can commit on your big advantage. On to the second DPS on the list, Mei. She's a different kind of off meta, where she counters more than she gets countered. She's also got recent buffs that haven't improved her playtime, but have definitely improved her impact. More ammo and more healing keeps her relevant, and although she can't 2-tap as fast and as easy as Cassidy can, she can 2-tap. Losing her 1-shot against Tracer after the HP buffs is pretty rough, but for a close range hero, she's got enough spam to keep up with the rest of the roster. As long as you're not completely zoned at range, there's a lot you can do to set up your own win conditions. And Mei's slow and Ice Wall still demand respect. Ice Wall can be broken a lot easier than before, but no other ability blocks line of sight and movement so effectively. Mei hasn't been consistently strong for a good while, but every map has choke points that she can stuff, and there's pretty much nothing the enemy can do but try to bait it. Breaking through one pillar is doable, but multiple pillars filling up an entire choke is good enough value that Mei can create picks with just that ability. Because Mei's identity is based off of her slow, freeze, and wall, Kiriko alone can shut down most of her kit. And like I mentioned earlier, Ice Wall isn't as durable as it used to be, but she has enough damage to not be a burden on the team, and her utility is extremely consistent, even if it's easily countered. She still dominates close range in a pretty convincing manner. Now for the first support on the list. Lifeweaver has gotten wildly better than he was when he launched, but of course he still doesn't fit into any composition. He's the most off meta hero on this list because he has never once been meta at all. And that's not just because he was weak, his kit is just purely defensive support, and that usually doesn't win you games. Keeping your team alive is great, but he's not so good at it that he can save his team consistently. Most other supports have a way to actively win the game for their team, even slightly, but Lifeweaver is more about delaying the loss. That's a lot of bad news, but over time he's gotten good enough that his healing output and survivability match how strong Life Grip is. Overwatch is an aggressive game, but all the best compositions are also good at playing slow. Bailing your team out of any situation is an incredible help that not all supports are good at doing, even some of the best ones. And as a support, it's not always enough to save your teammates. When you get pressured by flankers or aggressive plays, you have to be able to sustain it. And even though Lifeweaver can't teleport away or hop on walls, Pedal Platform is hard to deal with. It buys you a lot of time and soaks a lot of damage, and that's on top of his 275 HP and recently buffed dash. Now that all projectiles have gotten bigger, it's not too bad that Lifeweaver's hitbox is so big. Moving on to the next tank, we've got Reinhardt. Without Orisa holding him down, there's actually room to make aggressive plays. Rein isn't a great initiator in Overwatch 2, but hitting a pin is still a one-shot in squishies. You can really pop off when the enemy team isn't taking you seriously, and when it comes to basic tanking, like soaking damage and protecting your team, Reinhardt is still really effective. 1400 shield health and the fastest shield regeneration in the game allows him to mitigate a ton of damage, and any damage going into your shield isn't going into your team. even if it can feel like you're not blocking important damage. Ryan's also gotten to the point where he has insanely high bursts with his hammer and fire strike, but he still has to mostly hold his shield to play the game. Most people aren't used to how dangerous he really is, so you can catch a lot of players off guard with your burst. As long as you don't greed for the kill, you can lay down some heavy offensive pressure, so you don't have to just sit and take the spam coming your way. You definitely have enough shield that you can get really aggressive for your team without risking too much, and it can sometimes even win you the spam battle if your DPS are following up. Moving on to the last DPS on the list, it's Sombra. She only ever sticks in the meta when her EMP is fast enough to charge, because her kit can be really inconsistent otherwise, but she has a lot of potential that takes time to unlock. Even with her virus damage over time nerfed, her instant burst is still pretty crazy. A hack and virus onto Tracer is just a free kill, and she's usually untouchable otherwise. Hack in general is insanely versatile too. It can outright cancel some ultimates, and denying abilities at a key time during the fight can be insanely clutch. It's just tough to time it right, of course. Sombra's real weakness that makes her much harder to play than other more reliable flanker options has to be her survivability. More specifically, her escape options. Translocator is great, it's an instant teleport, but it's really easy to poke Sombra out of invis after it unless the Translocator completely leaves line of sight. If you're looking to abuse Sombra when she's not farming 10 EMPs per 10, you'll have to always set up escape routes with your Translocator before you get started with your engage. If you throw it backwards or up reactively, there's a big chance you can get tracked and hunted down. It's a big hurdle to overcome, but when you do, you can be even more effective than Overwatch 1 Sombra. Hacking out of invisibility, 160 SMG DPS, and a new 140 damage burst ability is a lot to deal with. Next up is the newest support, Iola, and it's pretty good for her and Lifeweaver that they're at the very least playable, despite being significantly less viable than the top supports. Iola plays a lot different from Lifeweaver though. He spams heals and she spams damage, and even though her healing pylon can be easily destroyed, it's a structure to kill. Without utility, she can get overwhelmed by high impact ability pushes, but pylon at least soaks damage for you, and outburst helps you kite even further. Iolia's neutral is about just spamming effectively, forcing heroes out and getting some more space for your team. So as long as you don't die when you get fought back, you can be pretty decent. And if you can hit a flank safely like on Gibraltar or Paraíso, you could be a win condition on your own. She's the only support that can add DPS level damage to the team, so as long as your teammates aren't trolling, it can actually feel pretty impossible for the enemy team to hold space. On to the final two heroes. First we've got the last tank on the list, Wrecking Ball. He's got a lot of changes that make him a lot more viable, but the most impactful one turned out to be the new retracting grapple. Wrecking Ball has two big problems, engaging safely and disengaging safely, and the new grapple allows him to swing insanely high up into the sky at all times, and fast. For now, his slam engage is barely enough value, but if you can keep going in and out without danger, it's pretty good. And grappling high into the sky makes it harder to stop your slam, and it also gives you more time in the air to get your grapple cooldown back. Just 2 seconds less makes a big difference between an easy and an impossible escape. Wrecking Ball also has decent damage. It's always been one of his strengths, and just shooting heroes like Kiriko and Baptiste is enough to force their abilities. Even in the toughest matchups, as long as you can hit and run consistently, you can have more than enough impact. And Wrecking Ball will only get better, so it's definitely a good time to start playing him now. For the last off-meta hero on the list, we have Zenyatta. He struggles a lot with certain map types, but he's also a support who will keep getting value unless he's dived, and you can use that massively to your advantage. Positioning is pretty much everything. You've got your knockback kick to make up for it slightly, but it's just that, slightly. A proper engage when you're not in a defensive enough position will wipe you out, but you can also bait dives easy that way. It's pretty tough, but if you're aware of the enemy flanks and frontline, you can game both angles. When flankers think you're watching frontline, they'll push more aggressive, which you can be ready for. Headshots are really easy to hit when you're in control of the duel, using corners and cover to dodge damage. Zen is really straightforward, so when he's not as good like on Flashpoint and push maps where fights are much more dynamic, you'll have to bait to get good value. That's it for the best off-meta heroes in Season 10. If you're looking to improve on the top heroes or even just your favorite ones, use the link in the description to get access to a GameLeap membership. There are tons of guides and courses that can help you get better, faster. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.